Hello everyone, my name is Strange and I believe that people should know the truth. Every day, every hour, and every minute. Right now, someone is being abducted by aliens. This is always a drama for the families of the abducted because they will never know the truth about where their loved one has disappeared. I have secret documents in my hands right now regarding a mysterious kidnapping. The story is terrible and incredibly interesting at the same time. After studying all the materials, I decided to make it public. Since there are too many materials, the story will be released in 3 parts. As always, for the safety of my sources, all names have been changed and the documents have been given an artistic color. And so, I'm starting. A young man named Michael was sitting on the sand, which was still warm despite the evening. He and his wife Maria admired the sunset and were happy. Michael had been planning this vacation for a long time, insured against everything from overtime, which was actively imposed by his stupid boss from various force majeure. In the end, everything happened exactly as he had planned. And here they are, the young Hutchinson family, Michael, Maria, and their 5-year-old son Daniel on vacation in Coronado, San Diego, California. The man drank a cool Pepsi and hugged his wife by the shoulder. Her blonde hair caressed her neck pleasantly. It was safe and calm. The sun was slowly sinking below the horizon, filling the ocean with a yellow ruby light. Maria pulled away from her husband's shoulder and shouted, turning back to where a small 3-person tent stood right on the sand of the beach.
Daniel, run to us. Look at how beautiful the ocean is.
A dark-skinned boy came out of the tent clutching a bag of cookies and smiled at his mom and dad. He put on his sandals at the entrance to the tent and ran to his parents. The boy looked very much like his Italian-American mother. Daniel squeezed in between his parents and perched comfortably, staring at the ocean with all his eyes.
Daddy, are there whales in the ocean?
The man pulled up a pack of cigarettes from the sand, fished one out, and lit it, blowing smoke aside. Of course, and whales and all sorts of sea monsters. Boo! The woman laughed and looked at her husband with playful reproach.
Michael.
The man inhaled again, stretched out in surprise. Well, what about it? I served in the Navy. Here the man's intonation changed. He began to portray a desperate pirate from a children's cartoon. Yo ho ho! How many things I've seen! I harpooned Moby Dick with this very hand. The man jumped up and began to dance. I have traveled all 7 seas and stood under bullets when buckshot rained down from the sky on the deck. Then my leg was torn off by a damn English corps, and after that it grew back. The boy laughed and clapped his hands. Maria smiled ironically but looked with happy and loving eyes. Michael finished his impromptu performance and it lasted at least 15 minutes, which was what it was. The young man had an extraordinary imagination and love of life. The sun has already disappeared below the horizon, illuminating the sky with a dim, fading light upwards. Stars were appearing on the darkened strip of sky. Daniel yawned sleepily. Maria pulled him to her.
That's it, baby. It's getting cold, and you're already asleep. Go to the tent, pack up. Mom will be here soon.
The baby kissed his mother on the cheek and went to the tent. The woman remembered something and followed him, winking at her husband. After putting her son to bed, she quietly, so as not to make noise, unbuttoned a small refrigerator bag and took out 2 cans of beer, one for herself, the other for her husband. Maria and Michael clinked 2 tin cans together.
You know, honey, at such moments, I feel like a happy person.
Me too, dear. Maria stretched her lips to her husband, kissed him and hugged him. The husband hugged his wife in response and began to gently push her down on the sand, kissing her from above. An hour later, 2 lovesick bodies were lying right on the cape, which had been laid out in advance. It was calm and ordinary. I wanted to live and enjoy life.
We've come so far, honey. Which way is Washington?
His wife's head lay comfortably on Michael's chest. He stroked her hair, feeling the wet sand on his fingers. I don't even know, honey. It's probably there. The man pointed a finger at random to the side. Actually, you know, honey, I'm very glad that we finally managed to escape. You deserve this vacation. It's been a hell of a year. And it's good for Danny to get away from home. He's happy.
And I'm happy, darling.
The man stretched. That's nice. Maybe we should rinse off.
Come on, and we'll pack up. What are your plans for tomorrow?
Let's wake up, roll up the tent, and go further explore Coronado. A man and a woman, holding hands, entered the water of the ocean. the surface of which shimmered ghostly with moonlight reflected in the myriad clouds of plankton carried by the current to the coast. The moment was mysterious, pleasing, and a little disturbing. Michael was floating on his back and Maria was next to him. Both were looking at the stars and did not hear each other with their ears immersed in water. At that moment, the husband and wife felt the rotation of the planet, admired the Milky Way interspersed with billions of stars and nebulae. The sight was mesmerizing. But the grandeur of the heavenly stars left an imprint in the soul, reminded of its own insignificance and insignificance in the picture of the world. Maria shivered, her body lost its balance and began to sink into the water. The man quickly picked her up, stepped to the bottom and carried his wife to the shore in his arms.
What do you think, my love? Are we alone in the universe?
The man easily carried his naked wife in his arms and thought that Daniel was already asleep. Otherwise, he would have seen Mom and Dad in their natural form. He shook out his wet hair. I think, honey, we need to dry off and get dressed. As for the universe, I'm sure we're not alone. Maybe someone is watching us now, huh? Michael made a frightening sound. Bow, and gently bit his wife's neck with his lips. From the conclusion of the Preliminary Investigation Commission, Department of Investigation, State of California, San Diego.
At 06:00 in the morning, during a sanitary inspection of the beach area on the west coast of Coronado Island, employees of the Diego Resort Administration discovered a 3-person tent burned on one side and a naked man unconscious. The police and employees of the 2nd Coast Guard Department were called to the scene. The man needed immediate medical attention, which was provided by a full-time Coast Guard doctor. Later, the man was taken to the San Cristofan Hospital at Federico 26.
Michael struggled in the ambulance after coming to his senses. He shouted and demanded that the car be stopped. The doctors could not understand anything from his screams. They stated the strongest shock. When Michael got up from the wheelchair and grabbed one of the doctors by the collar, the nurse injected him with an ampoule of sedative. Michael began to slump on the cot. The doctor was used to various kinds of reactions, and this time he just adjusted the collar of his robe, looked at Michael with a skeptical look. The main health indicators were normal. A severe bruise of the back was diagnosed, a small burn under the right nipple. Further examination will be performed at the clinic. Previously, it can be concluded that the condition of a man does not cause concern for life. The burn under the right nipple, round, with smooth edges, was mistaken for a bullet wound, a blind wound from a small caliber or traumatic weapon, but the ambulance doctor refuted this assumption, a normal, closed burn, possibly from a cigarette. The doctor has seen everything and everyone. Recently, a woman was picked up who was beaten and fucked by her boyfriend, and then put out cigarettes on her buttocks. Moreover, the victim herself, in quotes, demanded that she be released as soon as possible to a loving boyfriend with oddities. Michael was lying in the medical ward. The fixation on his hands had long been removed. When he regained consciousness, he realized himself that nothing could be achieved by violence. Reluctantly, he held on, answered clearly. Periodically, his voice broke, but within limits. Although there was hell going on in his soul, which he himself could not figure out. I'm telling you for the 100th time, I was on the beach with my wife and child. They're gone. Do you understand or not? They were gone. A fat mustachioed detective was sitting in front of the bunk. His shirt barely met on his belly. The view was somewhat ridiculous. It was Inspector Fowlis, nicknamed the Skinny Fox by his colleagues. Despite his absurd and ridiculous appearance, the inspector was an ace in his field.
Mr. Hutchinson, we organized a search team immediately after you reported your wife and son missing. Understand that the more openly you tell us about the circumstances of that evening, the sooner we will get the result. This is my job.
So why the hell are you not working but sitting here? I've already told you everything. The detective looked clear and simple, friendly, but maintained absolute seriousness. Once again, it's the same thing. The victims accuse the employees of the criminal department and think that the detective's job is to consume gallons of coffee, eat donuts, and do nothing.
I understand your concern, Mr. Hutchinson, but please, let's look back at the circumstances of that evening.
Michael sighed, clutched the sheet with his palms, and squeezed his fingers tightly. He barely restrained himself from falling into hysterics again. I have already said, and I repeat, I have been staying with my family on the coast since the evening. We pitched a tent, spent time. Then, I can't remember exactly, but my wife fell on the sand. Something dragged her, invisible. Then she just disappeared. The man shook. The nurse standing next to the inspector went out into the corridor, and a minute later the doctor entered the room.
Excuse me, Inspector. Just a few more minutes and that's it. The patient is in a state of severe nervous and neurological stress.
The inspector paid no attention to the doctor.
Mr. Hutchinson, did you see the men who took her away?
No, she just got covered in light and flew to the sky. The same thing happened to my son later. He was asleep. Where? Where is my family? The doctor peremptorily pointed the detective to the door and went to the bed, turned to the nurse.
Prepare half a cube of clozapine. Then prepare the patient for a psychiatric examination.
Michael, who had received the injection, looked at the detective. Consciousness began to fog up. Find them, I beg you, find them. Detective Fowles put on his hat and walked towards the exit, saying clearly,
This is my job.
In the evening, 3 days later, the detective was sitting in his office, in which, in addition to government furniture and office equipment, one could see objects memorable for the family. In the closet, under glass, there were mismatched cups for winning shooting competitions and the bowling championship. In the local bowling alley between adjacent departments, also under the glass in a prominent place, stood a slightly bent child's drawing with a cute inscription, Daddy. Detective Fowles was sitting at the table, stretched the dictaphone across the surface of the tabletop and turned it on. Michael's voice sounded far away. To understand the man's pain and panic, you had to see him. However, the recording was not intended to be re-listened to for the sake of idleness. The live audio recording was intended for the ears of psychologist Samantha Crane, who became famous in the recent case of the capture of a sexual maniac operating on the coast in San Diego.
What do you say, Samantha?
A beautiful, well-groomed woman in a business suit sat down on a chair.
What can I say? The man is in a state of extreme stress, scared of something. He constantly asks where his family is. He probably witnessed something terrible. Maybe drugs?
The inspector shook his head negatively.
No, the test showed only 0.5 ppm, which corresponds approximately...
A can of beer?
The inspector nodded.
In addition, Hutchinson is in good standing at his place of work. He is a law clerk at the Washington Building Trust, and my gut tells me that something terrible really happened. Samantha, what about his testimony about the light and his flying wife and son?
The woman frowned.
You see, Mark, Samantha addressed the inspector by name. This may be a protective reaction of the psyche to severe stress. His wife and child could have been raped right in front of him. They could have just been killed. Are there footprints there?
The inspector shook his head again.
A preliminary inspection of the scene did not give any traces. The area was cordoned off, but at noon, there was already a real mess. You know, we can't put guards on the beach.
I understand. Absolutely no trace? Maybe blood?
No. They found only one melted beer can. Experts are dealing with it. By the way, we were able to identify the victim's identity from the bank. Fingerprints. At first, he did not remember his name, but at the same time he clearly remembered the loss of his wife and child, the bright light, and the flight. That's all.
Samantha frowned.
Bright light. A tent on the beach. Do you remember when we investigated the beach firefly case? That jerk who broke into the tents of couples, blinded them with a powerful flashlight, and then cut them up? Did one of the victims survive?
Yes, Sidney Monsford. But as you remember, Firefly was sentenced to 2 life sentences and is now serving his sentence in state prison.
Maybe a copycat? Or I can have a conversation with Mr. Hutchinson myself.
Okay, baby. We'll try to arrange it. The victim himself has been assigned a psychiatric examination.
With you again, Strange. Subscribe to the channel and click on the bell all notifications so you will not miss the continuation of this terrible story. As well as send me your stories related to aliens by email, you will find context in the About the Channel section. Together, we will force the authorities of all countries to disclose all the information they have. After all, people should know the truth.